So in this video, I'm going to start off with the sculpture. So I have 5 pounds of clay, and it's been divided into a bigger hunk, which is 3 pounds, and my smaller hunk, which is 2 pounds. And then I'm going to go ahead, since it's all just kind of a crumbly mass, just kind of wedge it a little bit and get it all mushed together. And I'm starting with the smaller amount just because, no actual reason, so it doesn't really matter. But you can see now it was all spaced out. Now it's a little bit more together. And I'm going to do the same thing with this bigger hunk of clay. So the smaller piece represents the neck of the animal, and the bigger piece represents what you're going to use for the head. Now remember, we're starting our sculpture solid, so we will have to hollow them out. So it's okay right now if they're not perfectly wedged, because you're going to have to hollow that out. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of tap this down on the table, and that's flattening the bottom of my small piece of clay. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of pull it. So this is that squeezing, kind of pushing the clay, and I want to make it so it's a little bit pointy at the top. And this is where that volcano form comes into play. So it may not be a true volcano, but it does kind of represent that. Or you could also think of it maybe like a horse's hoof, like where the ankle of the horse is, and this is their big hoof. So that makes the base, and then the start of the neck. So for my large hunk of clay, I need to look at my references. So I picked my dog. So this is Ricky. He is a long-haired Chihuahua, and he has a snout. And so if I look at my other picture here, this one shows the side of the dog and also the back of the head. So that's why I only have 2 references, but I recommended the side, the front, and the back. So he has what's called an egg-shaped head, and I'm just going to simply take my clay and kind of begin using my hands to kind of round the top out and narrow towards the bottom. And I'm simply kind of just like smacking this clay around, but you could also consider this pushing. And it's a big hunk of clay, so I can't just easily push, but I want to make this look like an egg shape. Now, in order to keep the head from being flat, I'm doing all of this in my hands. And so here is my egg shape. If you look at it that way, or if you look at it that way, it looks kind of like an egg and my volcano. So now I need to attach my head to my neck. And since I have the egg-shaped head, I'm not going to put it on like this. I want to make sure that I tilt it. Okay. So I'm going to place a hole in the back of the head and kind of open that up a little bit. This way the head will go onto the neck. And then I'm going to take my serrated metal rib. This is the one with the teeth, and I'm going to score. Now, if you don't have a serrated metal rib, your needle tool is just fine. But you want to make sure that you really rough up the sides, because this is how we're attaching the head and neck together. And I want to rough up inside the head. The clay that we're using this time is called Raku clay, so R-A-K-U, and it basically is the same as our gray clay, except it has little gritty pieces in it, kind of like the red clay did, and that's to add for extra strength when we're sculpting. So I want to slather some slip on. I'm using my gray slip. Because we're not glazing these, we don't need to worry about the difference in clay color, but it's really not that big of a difference. So the gray clay is going to be a little bit more pure white, and then the Raku clay, when it's fired, is going to be a little bit more tan. So I want to make sure that I squeeze that on nice and tight. So now I have my head and neck together, but it's going to be important that I blend. So I can use my finger. I could use a wood tool. So for some students, it's a little easier with the wood tool. I kind of really just like my finger, and I want to blend around. Now this is what's keeping my head and neck together, is the scoring and slipping, and then of course the blending. So it's very important that you remember to blend under the head and the neck. Sometimes students forget that area, and then when we go to hollow out our sculptures, you can crack or break your head off of your neck. So we really want to make sure that that's scored and slipped well and blended. Now remember, it's solid, so we're going to be hollowing this whole thing out. So now that I have my head and neck together, I need to check out my reference. And so basically, I'm going to start the subtractive method right away. I'm going to start taking clay away to help me kind of reveal the form of the dog's head. So I'm going to use my fettling knife, and if I look at my image, I know that it dips down with the snout, so I need to cut some clay away right away. So I'm just going to kind of come in and slice away some clay. Now with this method of sculpting, using the additive and subtractive, if I take away too much clay, I definitely can come back in and just simply add some more. So this is kind of that indentation where his eyes will go, but the snout is way, way too big for the Chihuahua. And I know that also from looking at my picture and from simply being around my dog. So I'm going to start thinning that snout out. So I took a little bit off of the sides. Now I'm going to come in to this side and remove some more. And then I'm going to take a little bit more out from underneath. And again, if you take away too much clay, then simply just add some more back on. So not the biggest deal. Okay. So now I have this a little bit more narrow. I'm taking all my scraps and kind of putting them aside. As long as they're still soft, I can use this to add back on. Now, I know that the Chihuahua's head itself is not this large, so I'm also going to start shaving away some of this clay. And for some students, this is a scary thing. You're afraid you're going to take too much off. Well, don't worry, because if you do take too much off, then simply just add some more clay back on. Whenever you add clay, you need to make sure that you score and that you slip it. So I am kind of making the head smaller to be a little bit closer to the true size. Now, I started with that egg shape. You might be creating an animal that has a little bit more of a rounded head. And if that's the case, you're going to do the same thing. You're just going to take that round ball this time, and you're going to open the back of that round ball up, and you're going to score and slip it on. So same process, just different shape for the head. And I'm taking a little bit away from the neck as well. So I'm trimming my neck. And if your base has really flared out, you can also trim that. But I'm just trying to make this a little bit smaller because the Chihuahua itself doesn't have a huge head or neck. Now I am leaving it a little bit bigger at the bottom so that it has a nice base to support the clay. And then I'm just cutting this a little bit more circular. And I can do this right now, and if I need to, I can come back to that later. So there's nothing that says you have to end up with 5 pounds because already, just by thinning it out, I removed a whole lot of clay. So if this clay is really soft, you can put it back into the tub, or like I was saying, you can use it to add on. So I need to continue to look at my image, and things are still kind of bulky, so I need to do some more trimming. And I'm actually going to trim the length off of the snout as well, because I know that that snout is not that long. And then I want to angle my clay in. So if you see, I took some more of that snout off, but it's pretty thick. So I'm going to come down, make it a little bit smaller. I'm actually going to squeeze the clay a little for that snout. And I'm going to round some areas out. I don't want it to look like I cut parts off. So by rounding things out, that's going to help make it not look so much like I just cut parts off. And so I'm just going to keep doing this until I feel fairly satisfied. with the size, and then I'm just going to continue to round. So I've been removing quite a bit of clay, and that is totally okay. Remember, we're just starting with the 5 pounds. Nothing says it has to end up being 5 pounds. All right, so now I have the snout facing towards me, and I kind of bent it a little bit when I trimmed it. And I want to round things out, so that's what I'm doing. All right, and I'm going to kind of push on his face a little. He has these little indentations that kind of happen before the snout. So now I'm ready for my eyes. So in this area that I cut before, that's where I'm going to put my eyes. So I'm going to press in to the clay, not super deep, but I'm going to press in to create eye sockets. So then I'm going to take my extra clay, and I'm going to take a piece, and I'm going to make a ball. Most eyes are round, or they can be almond shaped. Now when you go to figure out the size of your eyes, obviously something that size is pretty ridiculous. So right away, I know that that's too big. So I can cut it in half and roll that into a ball and kind of see how big that is. And so that's one way that you can help get the size of your eyes. So that's still ridiculously too big. So again, I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to roll that ball of clay. And then if I look at it, okay, so that's better, but it's still pretty big. So this time I'm going to cut it in half. And then I kind of want to make sure that my eyes are pretty much the same size. So if I look at them right now, this one's smaller than this one. So I'm going to shave this one down right away. I can put them back to back. Kind of see that, okay, this one's still a little too big. So I'm going to round it out. I'm going to look at them, and they're pretty similar in size. So remember that they're going to go into your sockets. Now this isn't going to look like your animal just yet, so I don't want you to stress too much, but because I'm attaching it, I need a score and slip. So anytime you're adding parts, score and slip them on. All right, so my eyes are in my sockets, but I need to create an eyelid. So over the top of the eyes, I need to create an eyelid, and then underneath the eyes, I also need to create something so it looks like it's sitting into the socket. So I'm going to take my extra clay again, and I'm going to roll 2 coils. So I kind of want to leave my coil fairly thin, and it's going to go over top of the eye, and then I'm going to pinch away this extra clay. So it's not going to look accurate. Right now it looks pretty silly. That's normal. And then I also want to do another coil that goes over the bottom of the eye a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to score and slip those on. So I'm creating kind of like the eyelid of the dog so that the eye looks like it's sitting in the face, in the eye socket. And like I said, if it doesn't look accurate right now, you're going to work on that. So for some students, this is really frustrating because you want it to look like the thing right away. And so they try to put ears on. Do not put your ears on right now. That would be considered what I call a detail. And so we want to make sure that we're not going to knock them off when we hollow it out or we continue adding thicknesses. So now I have these crazy coils around my eye, and I need to blend. So I'm going to turn it towards me just a little bit, and I'm going to take the lower part and I'm going to blend that into the face. Now I don't want to blend it so that I can't see the eye anymore, but I do want to blend and then I also want to blend a little bit of the top. So I don't want to blend it all the way in. If I do that, then I'm going to kind of get rid of that lid. Okay. So if you look at this side, it's just there, and here it's sitting in that lid. But what that does is now you can see there's a high spot and then it dips. Well, I know that he has a brow bone that comes over here. So I'm going to take some more of my extra clay, and I'm going to make it a little bit thicker this time. And then I'm going to add that on. So this requires you to do a lot of working back and forth, looking at your reference. Is it thick there? Does it look three-dimensional? All right, so there's my brow bone. Again, looks pretty stupid, so it's going to require me to blend it out. Now I have to get rid of this strange line that I've created from the brow bone into the eyelid. So I'm also going to kind of press that in. So now I've created the thickness of the head and the eye is sitting into the socket. Now when I do that, a lot of times that's going to make the nose bone need to be thicker. So now I'm also going to take some clay and I'm going to add it to the bridge of the nose. And I'm just working on one side right now for time's sake. Every time you attach a part, you need to score and slip. All right? So there I'm adding this big hunk of clay on. But if I don't blend it, that looks pretty ridiculous. So I need to make sure that I blend it into the top of the nose here. Blend down. Blend around the eye. I'm going to pull that snout up just a little bit. So hopefully you can see a difference now between the side that I put the eye on and then the side where it's just that partial eye. Now if I turn it this way, you can see that this is starting to come off of the head, so it's looking more three-dimensional, where on this side we look very flat. So that's why we need to add that clay, and so the additive method is going to help you add that. Now you can always go back through and make some adjustments. One thing about this type of clay is that it does dry fairly quickly. So if you're sitting somewhere where you have a lot of air getting to you, you may wish to move. Or if you're at home and there's a fan on in the room, I would turn that off. Because even though it's pretty soft right now, it does dry pretty quickly. And that allows us to continue to add more weight to our sculpture. So if you have some really soft clay, it may not hold its weight really well. All right, so if I look at my picture, I know that through here, he has a little bit of thickness. And so I'm going to add just a little bit in there. And it's mainly to the side of the eye. And currently, you know, this does not look like a chihuahua. It almost looks more like a pig maybe at this point. So I'm going to add some in here on the other side of the eye. And I did remove clay from there earlier, but it's a little bit too much. So this is where if you subtract too much clay, you simply can fix it by adding more back on. Now it's just really important that when you score and slip, you really, really blend and you push the air out from in between. That's really important. If you don't do that, you risk trapping an air pocket in there. And then of course I want to blend that in. But because we're going to hollow it out, I feel pretty confident that if we did get some air in between, we should be able to find that during the hollowing process. So I'm just going to take a second here and just kind of blend some things and round some things out. Now I've kind of just been focusing on the one side for time's sake, but you will want to do one eye, then do the other, and then continue to build onto it. Don't leave it like I did. This is just for demonstration purposes. So now I can come in with my needle tool, and if I look at the Chihuahua's nose, I can kind of start mapping that in to see if I need to add clay to the side of his snout. So I'm going to turn that towards me so I can see it. And his nose is relatively small, but he kind of has like these poofs. So there I just simply drew in some guidelines. Then I want to come in with my wood tool. Now you can use whatever wood tool is comfortable to you. I'm just using the one that I have. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to make those lines a little bit deeper. But remember, I don't want it to look like I drew on to the sculpture. So right now it still looks like I drew it on. So what I need to do is to round things out. And I'm actually going to turn it towards me for a moment. I can do some pushing, so I'm using my thumbs to kind of push some clay. If you're in the studio, rubber tip tools are really nice. Otherwise, I mean, the wood tools will work fine for what I'm doing, but sometimes those rubber tip tools will come in and just make things. But anytime you kind of open the surface up or quote unquote draw on it, we want to round it out because in the end, we don't want it to look like it's been drawn on. So I want to continue to round. So there, I have started the nose and the snout. I have one eye on, and I've added a little bit of thickness to the side of the head. I've added some thickness for the brow, for the eyelid. And back in here, I think I need a little bit more thickness through the middle. And that's because his head kind of narrows out to the sides to where his ears are. Now, I'm not even thinking about ears yet. I want to add all my thicknesses and get everything built up before I really worry about what to do. Again, I added that on, so I want to blend it. And then I know the ear is going to go here, and I know another ear is going to go here. So that just kind of helps shape up the Chihuahua's head a little bit more. So that's the first start for the sculpture. At this point, what I would continue to do is to finish this side, adding the same thicknesses I added over here, and blend things out. So the next instructional video will continue to show the sculpting method so that you can see how you get closer to making the animal look actually like the animal.